Now, they say that size matters. Insert your own opinions here. But what I'm talking about here is a question of scale. So back here, I've got a teeny tiny hand. Now I've got a really big hand. If you have no point of reference for that hand, how do you actually know how big it is? And this is something that has tripped me up with eBay auctions in the past. So I'm going to show you some stuff now to demonstrate why you should always ask the question, so how big is this? Now, a little while ago, I picked up a couple of Terrahawks toys, and it wasn't these ones, but these ones are here to demonstrate the point, and I'll show you the other two in a moment. And as per the title of this video, this is all about a question of scale. Because you might think, from looking at these, that all these three battle tanks are pretty much the same size. But of course, the size that things appear very much depends on the way your brain perceives things and what else is in the photograph with them that can give you an indication of size. Now, because I film on a very sort of blank background, you don't really have any term of reference here for how big these things actually are in real life. And I find this to be a problem with eBay auctions, where they'll give a very generic description of something. And if you're not familiar with the product line that you're looking at, you can be easily confused by the size of the thing that you're looking at, because of course people naturally take a photo where the subject of the photo fills the sort of screen grab size for the purposes of the auction. So what we actually have here is three battle tanks from Terrahawks that are all different sizes. Now, this is the smallest battle tank, which comes from the Battle Hawk large toy. And it has to fit inside the Battle Hawk, therefore it's not huge. This battle tank, which isn't in the best condition, is actually considerably larger than the Battle Hawk battle tank, but this was sold separately on a card as its own sort of individual standalone vehicle example, and as a consequence it got a bigger size, but it's still metal and still quite heavy. But the two do look, and if you turn them upside down, they do look relatively similar. So if you're not familiar with the coloration difference, in the sense that this has got a black sort of bracket and this has got a red bracket and an orange engine cover at the back here, then you can easily confuse the two. And finally, we have this one, which is another oddity, because this is a little wind-up battle tank, and it's shorter than the larger battle tank, but slightly longer than the small one. But obviously, different colour, but it's much taller, and it does, of course, have a wind-up system sticking out the side of it, and again, orange on the engine, but more detail on the engine as well. So if I were to put those through Google would probably be able to tell the difference between them, I suspect, from the actual detail. But if you see them on an auction and you're unfamiliar with it, then you might not know which version of the battle tank you're looking at, because it's all down to the size, because the details are relatively similar across the board, unless you really know what you're looking for. So if someone just happens to know that it's a Terrahawks battle tank, and that's all the description you get, then all you're left with is a picture which probably doesn't have a sense of scale attached to it. So is it that one or is it that one? That one's maybe more obviously different, but again, you don't really know what size you're getting because there's no point of reference. So bearing that in mind, you will understand then when I made this particular goof, and it was a bit of a goof on my part because I probably should have known this. You may recall that the Terrahawks as a team employed robotic characters called Zeroids. Now, I was intending to get this chap, and he is Sergeant Major Zero, voiced by Windsor Davis. Now, you'll see that he is an action figure sized Zeroid, albeit the Zeroid element is just the head, the ball on the top, and he just sits on a plinth to either sort of recharge or to be able to have eye-to-eye contact with the other characters, because otherwise he's just a ball rolling on the floor. Now, what I bid for, as it turned out, was actually this guy. And you'll see that the size difference there is quite considerable. But the overall layout of the two of them is very, very similar. So you can see that they are both derived from exactly the same idea, i.e. great big ball on the same sort of plinth, and there was no card. So all I had to go on was the figure itself, and again, the figure itself. Now, he normally comes in a very big box because he's a full-size character in a separate box, and he's got an action. Now, this is one of the things that should have given it away for me, is that he's got a little switch here which makes him jump down off his stand, and then he can roll off. But otherwise, his overall size is actually very, very, well, there's no real sort of structural difference between him and the smaller figure. The only thing I can recommend to you when you're looking at these two alongside each other, and let me just hold it a bit closer there so you can see, the only difference I can really recommend is that this Zeroid is much wider than his stand. So if you look at it horizontally, he is not sort of radically bigger than the top level of the plinth here. So the edges of his head aren't vastly wider than the top level of the plinth. Whereas with this guy, because the scale overall is much bigger, you can see that the sides of his head are coming down quite a long way to the side of his stand. Now, again, from a perspective point of view, this is all quite tricky. The other difference as well, I think it's fair to say, is that he's got some fresh air between the supporting pillars here and the central column there. That's absent on the smaller version. So if you have a look at this stand, you can see that the supporting columns are more sort of attached to the central column there. So, but otherwise, the molds are very, very similar. And so the funny thing was that normally he goes for a lot more than these. Well, I say normally. In the box, he would be more expensive than him, but him on a card can be relatively expensive, but I actually got him for less than I would have expected to pay for him. So I thought I was getting the smaller one because people weren't bidding hard on it. And there was nothing in the description to distinguish it, one Sergeant Major Zero from the other Sergeant Major Zero. So that's what threw me. And that's what prompted this video, basically, because, as I say, I ended up, I just got him in the post, and when you sort of open a parcel and you think, hang on, that's not what I thought I was getting. Why have I got him? And I went back and I looked hard, and I thought, oh, of course, because they look so similar that I just completely mistook them, one for the other. So it's something to be aware of, I think, on eBay auctions, when you just see a sort of a blank image of something and you don't get a lot of description. Just think to ask the question, if you're after a particular thing, that if it's late at night or whatever, and your brain might play a trick on you and say, actually, that's the thing you're looking for, go for that one. But in fact, you've made a very logical assumption. Your brain's done a sort of image pattern match idea in of itself, and thought, yeah, this is the one I was going for. I should get this because it's Sergeant Major Zero. It's clearly the right character. It looks very similar to the action figure I was thinking of. So yeah, let's have at it, But as I say, this resulted in me getting a surprise purchase item that I hadn't anticipated, and that indeed I already have. But the good thing is I've never taken the one that I've got out of the box. That can now stay in the box. And I've got this big chap out of the box. So, nice to be able to show them both alongside each other, of course. But it just goes to show that, you do have to take a little moment just to not make these sorts of potentially costly mistakes, arguably. Just notice as well, looking at it side by side, the mouth is also a difference, because his mouth is all of one colour, whereas he's just got a sort of an outline of a mouth there. So that's another little difference should you happen to be randomly looking for such an item. But as I say, unless you are looking hard and you know that there's a different version, which I did know, so I should have double checked. But you'll just go by the description, and if your eyes don't call out the difference, then obviously you're going to make a mistake potentially. So just a little lesson learnt from myself there. So with that, I will leave you there. Do like and subscribe as ever. Cheers for now.